So recently, Jake Paul announced his next fight, and I didn't think it was possible, but this one is arguably worse than the last one, and I'm gonna love seeing the Jake Paul meat smokers try and defend him this time. So if you didn't know, Jake Paul's last fight was against someone who only had one professional fight in the last 5 years, and after Jake knocked him out in the first round, it was more than safe to say that this was another uneven fight in favor of Jake. And I'm not the only one with this mindset. Anyone with basic sports knowledge can see that Jake Paul is rising through the ranks in a way some would describe as pathetic. The only reason he is ranked where he is now is because he is Jake Paul. Don't believe me? The guy who is ranked 1 below him is 30-1. Even the guy who is ranked 1 above him is 37-15. How in the fuck do you go from 30-1 to 8-1, which includes Nate Robinson, to 37-15 and be like, yeah, that seems right? If I went through every fighter that's ranked below him, I bet none of them have a fucking retired NBA player on their record. Why couldn't I get that out? And speaking of rankings, you guys want to know where the guy Jake Paul's fighting is ranked? Oh, that's right, he isn't, because he retired from boxing in 2018, which is why, again, he has only fought one professional fight since then. Apparently, the requirements to fight Jake are, you are not to have had a professional fight in the whole time Jake has been fighting and training. I'm not even kidding either. On BoxRec, it doesn't even say his age or his rank. He's been retired so long, they stopped giving a fuck about him. Jake Paul is piling up the worst record in boxing history, and that's saying something because there's this guy who's 12-279, and hey, he hasn't fought since 2018, so he is literally one fight away from being qualified to fight Jake Paul. He is actually overqualified, if I'm being honest. And what's funny is that when I made my other video, people were saying every boxer does this, meaning that they fight mediocre people at first to get their name out and then knock out a fucking all-star out of nowhere. I will delete my videos if you can find another boxer who in their first 9 fights, the first 4 were against someone at their debut fight, and then from those 4, one of them is a YouTuber, one a retired NBA player, and the other 2 retired MMA fighters. I will literally suck your mama's feet if you can find that. Just because they're athletes doesn't mean shit. He could have challenged LeBron James and probably would have won because he doesn't know anything but how to score a basket.
I didn't go to college, sorry.
And besides, we saw what happened the last time he stepped into a ring with an NBA player. But he really thought all these fights were making him badass. He's like, I think this boxing shit is easy, and then loses to someone who actually boxes for a living. And he's like, hey, who's recently retired from the UFC? Because honestly, I didn't think this was a fair fight. And then his manager's like, well, actually, honestly, this was your most fair fight. And he's like, shut the fuck, you're not the one fighting, shut the fuck up. And even though anyone can look up this information about his opponent and see that they're retired and that they're 10 years older than him, he's still like, the goal is simple, build the skills to become a world champion. Next up is a guy who has twice as many professional fights under his belt than I do. Yeah, and last time it was a guy who won all these belts, and you literally showed us that didn't mean anything. And not to mention, he's fucking retired. Jake Paul went out of his way to find someone who hasn't been professionally fighting to make his next opponent. You Jake Paul fans are delusional if you can't see how pathetic that is. He is boxing at a time where he can call out literally anybody to be his next opponent. I'm not saying they're going to accept the challenge, but using the excuse that this is building up your experience is bullshit when you're not even fighting people who are actively competing. Jake Paul's ego is so fragile it won't let him lose. Yeah, he lost to Tommy, but that was because his ego was telling him, yeah, we got this in the bag. He comes from a place that thinks fucking Chinese food comes with French fries. Deep down in me, the American wanted Jake Paul to win, but what his ego didn't take into account was he has never had a real fight prior to that one. There's no doubt Jake can box. He's been training with fucking Shane Mosley, but at no point other than the Tommy fight has he used any of his skill to his full potential. At what point does someone on his team tell him that, yo, you need to start fighting people who are actually ranked at least in the top 20? Just because the guy you're facing has twice as many fights as you doesn't mean shit according to BoxRec. There are people who have as little as 1 fight who are in the top 10. Just based off that and the fact that his one win was against Roy Jones Jr., Jake Paul should be in the bottom 20, not the top. If I was trying to make a name for myself as a boxer, I would be pissed that Jake Paul is able to fight people who are retired and others will see that as him getting better, while others have to actually fight people who they have a good chance at losing to. They're like, Jake, do you want to fight this guy or this guy? And he's like, actually, I was thinking of fighting the first ever trans woman and becoming the first ever dude to just knock the fuck out of a trans woman in the ring. Not in public, don't worry guys. In the ring. So none of y'all can get mad. It'd be like that. It'd be something cool. He should do something like that. And then actually have it to where it's just like a professional boxer in makeup, so he just gets knocked the fuck out. Pull a little switcheroo at the end. Just because Jake Paul pays people who he has an advantage over to fight doesn't make him any good. Anyone who is going to try to defend this again, remember, unless you can find someone whose 8 out of their first 9 fights are this lopsided, then shut the fuck up about Jake building his resume. A resume for what? The most pathetic boxing career a YouTuber could have? Because that's what it looks like he's going for. See you guys tomorrow. Peace.